Today we're going to examine my all-time favorite spaceship creation. This battle cruiser I built for Shiptember back in 2021. We're going to check out a lot of the different details, the build process in general, my main inspiration, and all sorts of other fun stuff. So let's dive in. The first and most important thing to know about this craft is that it was built for Shiptember. Now that's an annual theme month that occurs during September, and you're challenged to build a spaceship that is at least 100 studs long, which is quite a big craft. That's 80 centimeters or over 2.5 feet. And you have to do this in just 30 days. There's a lot of challenges involved with that, because you need to have a very sturdy core able to support the weight of such a large build, and of course have a clear vision from the start so that you can actually accomplish finishing a model that large in the time allotted. For me, in 2021, I knew I really wanted to participate in Shiptember. It's one of my favorite theme months, but I was very busy the first few days of the month, and so let a few days slide by before really getting going on the new build. Often when I'm tackling a new spaceship, I go online and look up spaceship concept art, and also browse through old ship builds on Flickr. And because Shiptember is such a popular event, there's loads of amazing ships to be inspired from. And this time around, while I was looking at some old models, Pierre's masterpiece of Marka battleship really caught my eye, and I decided that basic silhouette was what I was going to try to do for this year's ship, of course putting my own twist on the details and colors. And speaking of colors, that's another very big decision to make when working on a ship, because there's so many pieces needed to complete something that large. In my case, I've been able to stock up on dark gray, tan, a little bit of dark tan, and some olive green elements along with some orange elements. And I knew the bulk of the ship would be tan and dark gray, because I've been able to get quite a lot of those elements from the pick-a-brick wall. Once you've decided on the shape and color scheme for your craft, or even before the colors if you want, a really important thing to start with is the core. And this needs to be super solid, and this time around I went with this setup using some Technic bricks, basic bricks and plates, and then the main strengthening component was brackets, both up and down 2x2 brackets. And I alternated these, wrapping them around the Technic bricks, and then locked them in with plates on both sides to give a super strong core. Another common frame method used in Shiptember is Technic bricks alternating with a fair bit of space between where they're pegged in with the Technic holes. This gives them a lot of vertical strength, and you lock over their top and bottom with plates, and then it's easy as well to connect into the Technic bricks later, or put a couple layers of these together and sandwich them and make a really strong assembly. Another thing you're going to want to keep in mind around this point is how you're going to display the ship. If you want to have it on a stand, which I think is usually a better approach, then you'll need to accommodate that by leaving spaces for the stand to slot into, or some sort of connection point that's super solid and also pretty close to the center of mass, so that the stand actually ends up working when your ship is complete. The stacked vertical prongs of Pierre's ship are one of the main things I wanted to make sure stayed true in my own model. So I started off with a simple frame and then hooked those together with some Technic beams arranged in a triangle formation, which looked great and also was super strong. And I made the frame a little bit shorter than I thought it needed to be, so I could end up having the panels that would be visual, the actual cladding, extend a little bit past the frame and not have to worry about it being visible. A fun piece I had gotten from Lugbulk the year before were these long brown tubing elements, and I used those around the beams connecting the top and bottom fins to give some extra detail. After getting this much of the core built, I decided I wanted to try my hand at doing the upper panels first. Now for this, I decided to build primarily sideways, which let me utilize ingots and cheese slopes, which are two of the tan elements I'd gotten off the brick wall, for a nice unique shape on the top of the panel and the bottom of the panel. And here's the buildup of how that went together. I then just used a brick modified with stud, one bound round plate with hole, and a robot hand clipped to a plate with handle to allow it to connect at a slight slope to the main body. And this was very early on in the process, so it was quite easy to feel free to try playing around with different colors and textures and patterns to figure out what looked good as details and what was going to be too distracting overall. One thing that I was pretty pleased with was this simple combination of different round elements for some missile bays on the upper panels. Another design I found super satisfying was actually something suggested by John, or at least something along these lines. And it consists of a simple core of stacked bricks, some of which have studs on the side, and they're spaced out so you get just a half plate offset between these dark tan 2x2 tiles that are added on. And I used this to create sort of a giant railgun mounted to the bottom of the craft. One of the trickier transitions in the ship was this large angle piece that connects the bottom fin up into the main body of the craft. I knew that would be a really important transition to get done well, but was having a bit of a hard time figuring out how to fill it. Then I had the idea of putting some large canisters in, some sort of fuel source or storage unit, I suppose, and then was able to find a way to fill in the space around them with tan cherries, which I happen to have gotten quantity from some random set, and they fit really nicely with their shape in that area. At this point, I went back to taking another pass at the details of the panels, and one of the things I found a good improvement for was adding a set of turrets on the upper panels, and that used this design of a couple of brackets hooked around some orange elements that gives a nice bit of color pop and also adds to the military feel of the craft. And continuing on the bottom panel, I realized it was going to look pretty strange if the railgun was just sitting by itself as a square 2x2 column with those sideways tiles on it, running the whole length of the bottom of the ship. So I needed something to kind of transition to the start of that railgun. And for that, I settled on these little chunks of dark blade that feel like these large sturdy panels or maybe power-up core for the railgun, and they add a bit of extra bulk to the beginning there. And through this whole period, I was trying to be very deliberate with the color placement and not make things look too splotchy or just little bits of color scattered everywhere, but trying to keep the lines very clean overall. I was really happy with my progress up to this point and felt like I was doing well time-wise as well. So then I realized I really needed to tackle something I've been putting off, and that was detailing the space between the panels over the top. Now this is a section that was not going to be that visible in the final ship, but I still wanted to complete it and have it be something I was happy with, especially because, of course, I would be seeing the ship in person all the time. And from that area, there came to a couple details that I was really fond of, and I'll show breakdowns here. The first is this grill setup, sort of a radiator looking thing for the very front of the ship that goes between the two top panels. And I'd been playing with a couple different things for this area and not settled on anything I liked, and then found this configuration of the flags, which gave some really nice thin lines. I love the texture of it. The other was a simple bit of greebling that goes between the panels on the top edge of the ship. And there I didn't have a lot of depth to work with, so I was fairly limited in my options, but I was still just playing around with what interesting pieces I had in the appropriate colors and found this combination of skis and really love how the dark tan inkwells leave a tiny circle peeking up through the hole in the skis. I had made a bricklink order for some interesting construction elements I thought might fit well to add some mechanical greebly bits of the rear area and was waiting on those to arrive, so progress stalled out for a few days after completing the front section. And then when the pieces did get delivered, I found I had lost a bit of momentum and was having a hard time getting somewhere I liked or even sitting down to build in general. When I did sit down to build, I would just be sitting there looking at the pieces, not really getting anything done. At which point I realized I really just needed to start throwing stuff on the ship, and from there I could see what worked or didn't and evaluate better how to approach it with the next take. If you're just sitting and considering too long, sometimes you end up stalling and not making any progress, whereas if you build something, even if it's off, you can then see what's off about it and use that to correct and make something that does work. So I tried a bunch of different panel placements and uses of some of those new construction elements I'd gotten, and eventually settled on something I was pretty pleased with. I was also utilizing John's outside opinion for feedback quite a lot during this process, and that helped give me a better idea of what was working and what was not, because sometimes, again, when you've been working on something for a really long time, it can be hard to accurately gauge how well it's going and what's off or what's working really well. And it was John again who had a super nice suggestion for the rear, and that was to create some sort of ring of orange in between the two rows of dark blade panels. And I had come up with this assembly of orange bionicle feet, but wasn't able to complete the circle with more than 4 of them, because I think I only had 8, so enough for 4 sets of the assembly. But then I realized I could just system build something to fill in the gaps, and that ended up being one of my favorite things about the overall shape of the ship, was this unique ring that's almost like a giant gear of orange in the back. I was also able to use some of the few olive green elements I actually had in quantity with these strange 2x2 modified slopes and some 2x2 corner wedges. And I really liked the texture and color pop that the olive green gave, especially paired with the dark blade and orange in that section. So once I had figured out the size of those rear panels and the ring of orange, I was able to then just greeble and detail around them, which was a really fun bit because it let me experiment with a lot of unusual pieces, and I knew it wasn't going to be the most visible part of the ship, so it didn't feel like there was as much pressure on it. But I still ended up getting a lot of details in there that I really love, including some masts and also torsos, I think these are, for details underneath the panels and then the actual engines in the back. At this point, I had also officially broken the 100 stud barrier, so I was really confident I would be able to finish. It was just tying everything together nicely, handling the last few bits of detail like the bridge, and then adding some stickers for a final bit of pop. And then with the final build completed just in time, I was able to just focus on getting photos and then editing those photos, which led to this for the final result. and it's a model I'm extremely proud of. I'm really happy with the way it turned out, and I think I'll be keeping it together for many more years to come.